from as well.
My name is Arjun Krishnan, and I am currently a research scientist at Princeton University, and I'm going to join Michigan State in the CMSC department as an assistant professor.
Good. Everything's good all the way around.
All right,
Okay.
good. All right, so let's just start out kind of at the top, real broad, and we'll drill down into a few other questions. So tell us what drew you to this new department and to Michigan State. What brought you here?
Of course, Michigan State is obviously one of the better schools in this country, so the choice of university is pretty obvious. I think the department is pretty special because clearly I think it's one of the few departments in the country where a lot of emphasis is potentially being given to theory meeting practice. And that has been great because my background has always been somewhere along the borders of two different disciplines all the time. So for undergraduate, I've studied engineering and biology. And for PhD, I did both computer science and biology. So it's always been sort of slightly outcast in traditional departments, and it really seemed like I would fit right in a department that emphasizes on interdisciplinary science.
Excellent, good. So tell me, if you could drill down a little bit more into that, what do you think really makes this department then very unique or different? It sounds like we are different from other universities. Why is that? What makes it unique?
I think the real point is the following, that because the emphasis is on both building good foundational methods that are applied to real and important problems, it is because it is set up this way, it allows for people from very, very different backgrounds to come and sit in one single department, which is absolutely unusual. Right? In this department, there are astrophysicists, there are mathematicians, and then people like me who have a biology background and who have moved into computational stuff. And for people with such diverse backgrounds to sit together and even exchange ideas, I think it's really, really rare. And that's what I'm totally looking forward to doing here.
Good. You sound excited about that cross-discipline and the collaboration, and I think you're right. If you've been isolated versus, you might be able to solve a problem that someone else's computation might apply to what you're
Right,
doing.
exactly.
So, good.
Yeah.
Excellent. So you're starting as a new professor here at MSU. Tell us a little bit about your previous institution and just how you'll transition here.
Sure. Currently, I'm at Princeton University, and I'm working with Olga Troyanskaya. And what we do is broadly in the field of genomics. And what I'm hoping to do is to bring my training in genomics and computational biology into solving problems that have slightly more relevance to healthcare and clinical practice. And that is my goal. And this is the application side. And the theory side, or all the major ideas, come from statistics, probability, and computer science. And that's where we use concepts from those fields to apply them to problems in biology. And I'm hoping to have a much more richer means of crosstalk between all these things in this new department.
Mm-hmm. Great. So tell us a little bit more. Let's drill down into your expertise or research, and what do you feel you're bringing into the new department? So tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. I think of myself as having come from biology itself and then transitioning into quantitative fields based on what we need to solve biological problems today. So what I mean is that my background, I've done lots of molecular biology, cellular biology, and so on and so forth. And then I started getting interested in problems that have to do with complex biological systems, which is, if you think of every cell in our body which has thousands and thousands of interacting components, or if you think of a disease which has hundreds or even thousands of different genetic factors and environmental factors contributing to the disease risk, these are all very, very complex systems. And people have always been studying complex systems in many different fields, be it in fundamental physics or in computer science. Right? So because I started getting interested in these problems, I sort of started getting gravitated towards computational approaches to solve them, because traditional approaches in biology do not have enough tools to actually address this level of complexity, because traditional biology is typically reductionist. We look at individual genes or a few genes, a few proteins, or one protein in a very, very deep way. So thinking about many different components that are talking to each other is pretty hard. So that's why we need computational tools. So that's why I started going into this field. Then I started interacting with computational biologists who have developed these tools, and it's a whole field that's been growing very, very rapidly in the past 25, 30 years, really. And then during my latest tenure at Princeton, I had plenty of opportunities to talk to computer scientists who come from a completely different background. And the types of methods or fundamental ideas that they develop, many of them I see as very ideal tools to apply to biological problems that I already know. But making this transition, making this connection of taking a very core computer science idea and applying this to a biological problem that's very interesting, I think it takes a little bit of domain knowledge in biology and some level of understanding of the methods themselves. And this is where I broadly come from, and this is my hope. My hope really is to contribute the bridging of these two fields within this department and hopefully across the university. But anyway, this is not absolutely new in the sense that there are lots of people who are doing many different parts of this whole bridging thing across the university. Ewing here at CMSE, or George Mears, or people like David Arnosti at BMB, they've all been doing this very successfully. I hope to contribute and be a part of the small group of people who do this very well.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So would you say the industry or area that you're most tied to then will probably be healthcare, or okay?
Right. I think the industry is not, healthcare is very broad. Mm-hmm. So the two things that I think will potentially help from research like this is genetic testing, which means that if you draw samples from people and measure something about their genome or their molecular profile, can you say something about their physiological traits or clinical outcomes or disease risk? Right. So that is an industry that hopefully will benefit from the work I do. And the other type of industry is basically a treatment industry, which has to really do with developing pharmaceuticals or drugs that are targeted towards very specific genes and processes that are involved in diseases. Mm-hmm. I think these two, I hopefully will have direct connections with them.
Well, we keep hearing in the media, precision medicine is such a buzz, and that's really though what you're doing, because you've got to have that with all that data and information. You've got to be able to analyze that to determine really what is the trigger.
Right.
So,
right.
Well, you'll definitely have some great collaborations with Dr. Wang. He sounds like the two of you sound like you're very much working in the same area.
Yeah, that's right.
That'll be very powerful to see
Yes.
you two work together. So let's switch gears a little bit and think about this in terms of if I were a 12-year-old and I'm interested in computers, I love to play my computer games, how would you explain what you do, why that work is important, and maybe why they should consider it as a future career? How would you explain this to a young person?
Okay. Well, so I can sort of explain this in terms of a problem that I've been considering for a long time, which is how do we have around 20 or 25,000 genes in every cell in our body? This is like having a box full of Lego blocks. Right? But then we know there are so many different cell types in our body. Our heart cell is different from our kidney cell, different from a lung cell. But they're all built potentially out of the same box of tools. But how they do very different things because how they are wired differently with each other. So how do you take the same box of tools, wire them differently to do very, very different things? We know this, we know how to do this, let's say using a box of Legos. But we don't understand how our body itself does it using the same set of genes, just wiring them very, very differently to do very different things in our body. So this is a very complex problem. obviously it has connections to fundamental biology as well as very, very applied cases where how we understand complex diseases and so on and so forth. And now the part about computer science really is exactly the points that you really mentioned. Right? We have two different challenges. One is these systems are really complex, so which means that you need very, very good computational tools to even attack them. And the second is because we are measuring or we are interested in so many different components, we need measurements of all of them, which results in lots and lots of data. So I think bridging these three things is really interesting. Biology, lots of data, and very good computational tools. I think that's where there is a ton of potential here, and it's really, really interesting, and that's why I'm here.
Great. Yeah, I think that computation beyond the sky is the limit for it because it applies to really every industry.
Right.
I mean, whether it be manufacturing or business, banking, whatever.
Right.
There's just numbers and so much data collection going
Right,
on.
exactly.
That, it's kind of mind-blowing when you think about all of that. Let's see here, kind of winding down and what haven't we maybe touched on. So let's kind of wrap it up with, you touched a little bit on why you think it's unique and what drew you here. Did the fact that we are putting this new department together change your view of Michigan State? Did it make you sort of take notice? What was your overall opinion of Michigan State, and then when you learned about this position and new department, did it maybe change your opinion? What's your thought on that?
It absolutely did. I think definitely, like you said, building an interdisciplinary department and inviting people who are completely interdisciplinary seemed like something totally new to me because I've obviously applied to lots of different places for my faculty positions, got interviewed at lots of different places, had a bunch of offers. So I think clearly when I had to compare all these different places and try to decide where I had to go, this totally stood out because every other chance that I had was in a slightly traditional department. And where here I thought I could learn so much by interacting with people, and then even just walking across to the conference room, I'll see something that I've never seen before. Because these people from very, very different backgrounds. I think that's what draws me to this department, and I hope that's what the whole group that I'm going to build in these few years draws. I hope that's what draws them here too, to learn a lot and then contribute in really new ways.
No, that's perfect. That's great. I think that's some of the message that we're trying to get across. Let's see if there's anything, you touched, your responses were excellent, so there were some questions I didn't even need to ask, so let me just kind of make sure. Let's round it up with kind of you personally, your goals. What is it you personally hope to achieve here? Let's see if we can round it up with that.
Okay. I talked a little bit about trying to understand how genes function in specific cell types, or how our different cell types are different from each other. All this stems from the motivation of studying disease, really. If you take a disease like autism, it specifically affects. It arises specifically because of genetic mutations that affect brain development. Of course, there are lots of environmental components, but there is a very strong genetic basis. This is true for every complex disease. There are mutations that affect very specific cell types and tissues in the body. It's not everywhere, it's just in one specific cell type. Right? Now, this is what I've been studying for the past 3 or 4 years. Now, I'm hoping to expand into slightly 2 more different aspects of studying disease on a large scale. And these are the following. And it's surprising that they have not been studied well until now, which is sex and age. Again, autism is a great example. It occurs 5 times or even 6 times more commonly in boys than girls, and it happens very early in development. It doesn't affect, you see it very, very early. But of course, if you think of a disease like Alzheimer's, it hits very late in development. If you take some disease like rheumatoid arthritis, it's more common in females than males. Even more surprising is that if you take drug development or drugs that have been developed, that are out there in the market, let's say to treat hypertension, you'll be surprised to know that they've all been tested only in males. Right? we actually do not know if there are good drugs that you can give to women with hypertension who are 65 years old so that you can restore their kidney function, right? So this is a combination of tissue, sex and age at the same time to understand both fundamental biology and disease risk. So this is where I'm hoping to go into. And obviously the goal here and the reason I'm here is to take a completely data-driven approach that takes advantage of thousands and thousands of pieces of publicly available data and data that's being collected in the College of Medicine here and elsewhere across the university, and to take advantage of the computational expertise in this department.
Good. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I'm excited for you because I can just see that you're